Tánaiste, I want to raise the issue of the orthopaedic waiting list in Galway, Galway region. Last Monday, a young man came into my office, 27 years of age. He's married with 2 children. He has been working. His wife is working. They have a mortgage. Unfortunately, he had an accident and he's waiting for treatment. He was working, he was trying to work and continue to work. He eventually had to give up. 5 weeks ago, he had to give up the work. He was getting some painkillers for the pain. He was told that he was getting injections that they would last up to 6 months. The pain left him for 5.5 weeks. The prospect he has now is 18 months waiting for an assessment, and then he will have to wait another 4 years for surgery, and that's what he's been told by the hospital. This young man cannot lift his children, he cannot drive, he can hardly walk, and this is where we're at with him. He's relying on his mother to bring him to the doctor. He's relying on his father to help around the house, and he has a mortgage to pay for which he's struggling. This is not somebody that's looking for a handout. It's not somebody that's looking for something soft. Minister, or Tánaiste, this is what's happening with the services in the orthopaedic unit in Galway. We have massive delays. And I do recall when COVID started, and I remember you coming down the steps from government buildings addressing the nation and setting aside all rules and regulations to make sure we dealt with it. And Tánaiste, I would say to you today that yourself and the Taoiseach and Minister Ryan need to come back down the steps and tell us how we're going to address the fractured health system that we have at the moment. The system has been creaking before COVID, but I think it has been further scarred by the effects of COVID. It is important that we get the health service right. We need infrastructure, we need additional beds, we need additional staff, and we need to make sure that, when I say staff, I'm talking about nurses, we need additional beds, and we need a functioning A&E units. We also need to put in place the necessary services that our people deserve. We need to dispense with this code for public procurement and this code for appraisals of every project we have to undertake. And I see the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform is here, and I think, Minister, you have to take on board the fact that we cannot continue with the same processes while the Minister for Health, who is sitting beside you, is trying to improve the services. We need to take immediate, emergency, essential actions to make sure that whatever projects we have in place to improve our infrastructure, to improve our capacity, that we get it done rather than spending years looking at it.
Thanks very much, Deputy. I'm afraid I don't have a specific note on orthopaedic waiting lists in Galway, but I'll make sure that we get one and we get you a fuller reply later. But I do want to acknowledge that there are far too many people waiting far too long for the operations they need, both in Galway and indeed in all parts of the country. And notwithstanding the fact that we have probably 1,000 more beds than we had 2 years ago, more staff in our health service than ever before, a bigger budget than ever before, more doctors than ever before working in our health service, we're essentially running up an escalator that's coming down at us. And that's because of a rising population, an ageing population with increased needs, then a pandemic, then a cyber attack. And that has put us in a position that is not where we want to be or expected to be at this stage. We do have an ambitious plan to reduce waiting lists that's been published already. So the Minister and I have been down the steps already with that plan. It's a €350 million plan to improve waiting times in 2022, the biggest waiting list plan that I've seen in my lifetime in politics by quite a distance. And if it works, and a lot of that will depend on whether we get hit by serious waves of COVID or not, but if it works, by the end of this year, we should have fewer people on active waiting lists than at any point in the past 5 years. Not saying we'll get there, but it would be a huge achievement if we can get to the point by the end of the year where waiting lists are at a 5-year low. For every patient waiting over 6 months for a high volume procedure, and that would include the vast majority of orthopaedic procedures, they will be offered treatment through the National Purchase Fund this year. The Waiting List Action Plan identifies 15 high-volume procedures, and that commitment is made for anybody who's waiting more than 6 months, is clinically suitable, can receive their care through the NTPF. The NTPF has confirmed that it has authorised offers of treatment to almost 7,000 people, and that it has sufficient capacity to increase what it's doing by about 100% by September 2022, therefore offering treatment to all 75,000 patients who are waiting on these procedures by the end of the year.
Thank you, Tánaiste. And I would say that there are plans to improve waiting lists, and there's money going into the system like nothing else is happening. And I have a concern about all of this money going in there, Ministers, on the basis that at the end of the day, the end user, the patient, it's not getting there. There's a huge problem with staff morale. We have nurses leaving the public health service because they are completely disillusioned with what's happening. We have less staff available to deal with the patients in the wards. We have a daft idea where we have, for instance, primary care centres built, and we have one in Tuam where there's no X-ray facility. So everybody has to go into Galway to get their X-rays done. And Minister, we have talked about this before, where your predecessor, Minister Harris, allocated 700,000 to put in an X-ray facility about 4 years ago. Today, it's still not happened. The equipment is bought and is stored in Germany and is probably out of date at this stage, and we just cannot build a room. And I think that's just a typical example of the challenges we have and how we get around them. So I think we need to look at this from a completely different perspective and get to the nub of the issue. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Deputy. Just in relation to Galway in particular, and I'm obviously aware that Galway is the tertiary specialist centre for a huge swathe of the country, and waiting lists there are comparatively worse than they are in other parts of the country. But there has been a lot of investment in recent years. There's over 4,000 staff now between University Hospital Galway and Merlin Park. That's a 12% increase since this government was formed. And the budget for the hospitals is now over €400 million, and that's a 10% increase since this government was formed. Construction is underway on a temporary emergency department, and that should be completed later this year. And building is also underway on a new radiation oncology unit, and we're very keen to get the new emergency department, maternity and paediatric into planning as soon as possible. I've spoken directly to the CEO of the HSE about this in the past couple of weeks. I share the enormous frustration that that project is progressing so slowly, and I am going to take a personal interest in it.
Moving on now to